Recording.
Children of Israel, from one seed you are, all brothers. Israel, Yehuda and Ephraim, hearken to your mothers, Leah and Rachel. One nation divided by time, but Abba says you're mine. Yes, Abba says you're mine. Amecha, 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 Israel, one people. What's it for Yehuda and all that are with him? Another for your brother Ephraim. Ephraim, children of Israel, from one seed you are, all brothers. Israel, Yehuda and Ephraim, hearken to your mothers, Leah and Rachel. One nation divided by time, but Abba says you're mine. Yes, Abba says you're mine. Amechad, 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 Israel, one people. This world's turned against us, closing in for the kill. We stand one nation under Yah, Israel. Israel, children of Israel, from one seed you are, all brothers. Israel, Yehuda and Ephraim, hearken to your mothers, Leah and Rachel. One nation divided by time, but Abba says you're mine. Yes, Abba says you're mine. Amecha, 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 Israel, one people. Amecha.
Welcome everyone. This is Brother Doug. I'm with my sister Shoshana, my brother Dennis, our sister Sally, and we are the Wakened by Yahuwah Assembly in Yahushua Messiah and Yahuwah Almighty. We are going to be doing a study today about the book of Ezekiel, chapter 32. We are going to read a chapter study today. And there's going to be a lot of differences you're going to see in the Septuagint version. My sister Shoshana brought this up to me that it would be a great idea to read from here and show people a lot of the differences here. So I will be reading from the LXXE English Brenton's version of the Greek Septuagint, Ezekiel 32, and you'll see some differences here. So here we go. And it says a lament over Pharaoh in Egypt. So you're going to see basically it's the judgment for what Pharaoh did, this Pharaoh of Egypt did to hide the house of Yashrael from Yahuwah's wrath, the northern house. So here we go. And it says, and it came to pass over in the 12th year, in the 10th month, on the first day of the month, that the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation for Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Very similar wording to Ezekiel 28 with the king of Tyre. Interesting. And say to him, you are become like a lion of the nations, and as a serpent that is in the sea. And you did make assaults with your rivers, and did disturb the water in your feet, and did trample your rivers. Now, just for interesting little thing here, this is the same Pharaoh that Yahuwah calls the great dragon in Ezekiel 29. So now he's being called the serpent, but in the Septuagint of Ezekiel chapter 29 it says, thus says Yahuwah, behold, I am against Pharaoh, the great dragon that lies in the midst of his rivers. That says, meaning Pharaoh says, the rivers are mine and I made them. So the Pharaoh is being controlled by this great dragon claiming to be the creator. Sound familiar? And so here we go. So I'm up to Ezekiel 32, and we got to about verse 3 here. Thus says Yahuwah, I will also, I forgot to read the second half of verse 2, my bad. Like a lion of the nations, and as a serpent that is in the sea, you did make assaults with your rivers, and did disturb the water with your feet, and did trample your rivers. Thus says Yahuwah, I will also cast over you the nets of many nations. So he's metaphorically, allegorically talking about, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to cast nets, trap you with the other nations, and will bring you up with my hook. And I will stretch you upon the earth, and the fields shall be covered with you, and I will cause all the birds of the sky to settle upon you. I will fill with you all the wild beasts of the earth. And I will cast your flesh upon the mountains, and will saturate them with your blood. And the land shall be drenched with your dung because of your multitude upon the mountains. I will fill the valleys with you, and I will veil the heavens, meaning basically he's going to cover the heavens when you are extinguished. And I will darken the stars thereof. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. So basically, this is where we get in the New Testament of the sign of the coming and day of Yahuwah, aka the day of Messiah, the day of Yahusha, it's also known as the day of his return. So you have a sign here that he's giving that the heavens are going to be veiled, meaning we're not going to be able to see the heavens. The sun will be covered, and meaning it will not show and give its light. The moon will not give her light, and the stars will be darkened. So you won't be able to see the stars. And the stars are angels according to Revelations chapter 1, verse 20. You can look that up for yourself. I might list that once we upload this video, but you can check for yourself. Revelations chapter 1, verse 20. Doesn't matter what translation or which manuscript of the New Testament. Every version of that verse says that the 7 stars are the 7 angels of the assembly. So you get the biblical presence, stars equals angels. Verse 8 calls them bodies, which is interesting. So it goes from stars to bodies. All the bodies that give light in the sky, meaning the angels, shall be darkened over you. I will bring darkness upon the earth, says Yahuwah Elohim. Now, I'm kind of interested here. Do they say body in the Masoretic text here? No. They call them stars. Okay, interesting. And I will provoke to anger the heart of many people, and when I shall lead you captive among the nations to a land which you have not known. So it's kind of interesting. He's dispersing Egypt like he dispersed his own people. Interesting. And many nations shall mourn over you, and their kings shall be utterly amazed when my sword flies in their faces. Who's the sword? Who's the double-edged sword? Yahusha. As they wait for their own fall from the day of your fall, thus says Yahuwah Elohim, the sword of the king of Babylon. So Yahuwah and Yahusha are using Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, to execute his wrath. So Yahuwah is using the king of Babylon to execute his wrath on Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Interesting. Of the king of Babylon shall come upon you, and with the swords of mighty men I will cast down your strength. They are all destroying ones from the nations, and they shall destroy the pride of Egypt, and all her strength shall be crushed. And I will destroy all her cattle from beside the great water, and the foot of man shall not trouble it any more, and the step of cattle shall no more trample it. Thus shall their waters then be at rest, and their rivers shall flow like oil, says Yahuwah. Kind of interesting paradigm here. I remember when Yahuwah says in the book of Jeremiah, he says that finally my land will rest for its Sabbaths that it is not enjoyed. So it's kind of interesting. There's like a little correlation between the Egyptians and Yahuwah's people, Yashrael. It's kind of interesting. When I shall give up Egypt to destruction, and the land shall be made desolate with the fullness thereof. When I shall scatter all that dwell in it, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah. There is a lamentation, and you shall utter it. And the daughters of the nations shall utter it, even for Egypt, and they shall mourn for it over all the strength thereof, says Yahuwah Elohim. And it came to pass in the 12th year, in the first month, or in the first new moon, on the 15th day of the month, the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, lament over the strength of Egypt, for the nation shall bring down her daughters dead to the depth of the earth. The waters under the waters, the depths of the earth, the pit. To them that go down to the pits, and Septuagint lets you know what the depths of the earth is. They shall fall with him in the midst of them that are slain with the sword, and all his strength shall perish. The giants also shall say to you, meaning to the Pharaoh, Be thou in the depth of the pit, to whom are you superior? Yea, go down and lie with the uncircumcised in the midst of them that are slain with the sword. Basically, the giants are saying to him, who are you better than? Are you better than any of these other pagan kings that have fallen to the Almighty? There are Assyria, Ashur, and all his company, the Assyrian, which we have found out to be known as Nimrod. In his day, he was known as the Assyrian. Ashur was another name for Nimrod, as also you have Amraphel, king of Shinar, and I mean he had so many names. All his slain have been laid there, and their burial is in the depth of the pit, and his company are set around about his tomb. Interesting. So could this be the tomb that's found in Iraq? Just a little theory. All the slain that fell by the sword, who had caused the fear of them to be upon the land of the living. There is Edom and all his army round about his tomb, all the slain that fell by the sword, and the uncircumcised that go down to the deep of the earth, who caused their fear to be upon the land of the living, and they have received their punishment with them that go down to the pit in the midst of the slain. And there were laid Meshech, Tubal, and all his strength round about his tomb, and all his slain men, all the uncircumcised slain with the sword, who caused their fear to be in the land of the living. And they are laid with the giants that fell of old. Genesis 6, anyone? The giants of old. So all these pagan kings, you got You got not just Pharaoh going down to the pit. Meshech and Tubal are with the giants of old. You have Edom, the Edomites, with the giants of old. Interesting. Who went down to Sheol, and your Bibles will say Hades. You know, if you have a Greek Old or New Testament, Hades is a substitution, which is not correct. It should be Sheol here. With their weapons of war, and they laid their swords upon their heads, but their lawlessnesses were upon their bones, because they terrified all men during their life. And you shall lie in the midst of the uncircumcised with them that have been slain by the sword. There are laid the princes of Ashur, or princes of Assyria, who yielded their strength to a wound of the sword. These are laid with the slain, with them that go down to the pit. There are the princes of the north, even all the captains of Ashur, Assyria, who go down slain to Sheol. They lie uncircumcised among the slain, with the sword together with their terror and their strength, and they have received their punishment with them that go down to the pit. King Pharaoh shall see them and shall be comforted over all their force, says Yahuwah Elohim. For I have caused his fear to be upon the land of the living, yet he shall lie in the midst of the uncircumcised with them that are slain with the sword, even Pharaoh and all his multitude with him, says Yahuwah Elohim. So that's the end of Ezekiel chapter 32 of the Septuagint. Very interesting stuff. Shows you what stars really are, calls them bodies, like heavenly bodies, which you can't really get in the Masoretic text. It has, I believe, verse 20 has a second part of it the Masoretic text doesn't have, which talks about the giants telling the Pharaoh, King Pharaoh of Egypt, go down to the pit. So some very interesting stuff you can't get in our regular Bibles of the Old Testament. So some very interesting stuff. And pretty much this is a judgment for this Pharaoh, because he pretty much kept Yashrael, the house of Yashrael, the northern house, basically he gave them a place of refuge when they were running away from captivity to the king of Babylon. Yahuwah told them, you can either stay here and live, or you can flee to Egypt and die. And that was in the book of Jeremiah. So this is kind of like the culmination, the what's it called? The peak of that prophecy. It's kind of like the climax. That's what's happening now. So now Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is getting punished for hiding his people from him. So anyway, so that was Ezekiel 32. I hope you got something out of it. I got a lot out of it. I know my brothers and sisters definitely got something out of this. This was a lot of meat in this chapter. A lot of stuff that is very interesting, and seems like there's a connection between this Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and the anti-Messiah, Ashur, the Assyrian, and pretty much there's a connection between them and Satan. I mean, he calls Pharaoh the serpent. Ezekiel 29, like I said before, in the Septuagint, he's called the great dragon. So there's definitely a connection here. He could be a type of anti-Messiah that was to come. So very interesting. So I just want to, well, actually, before we sign off, I just want to ask my brother Dennis, my sister Sally, if they have anything to add. You guys are unmuted right now.
Well, sounds pretty good.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and please stay tuned. We hope to do more studies like this. We will be getting back to our study. We did more last Shabbat. We did a study about the 144,000. We will be getting back to that soon, all of our viewers and listeners. So please stay tuned. Thank you for joining us on the Shabbat, and that was Ezekiel 32 from the English translation of the Septuagint. Shalom.